is Florida State and Mike Norvell going to have to look into bringing in a full-time play caller on offense moving forward? Is that going to have to be the case moving forward? If Mike Norvell is going to keep his job and Florida State finds, let's say 8 or 9 wins, is it going to have to come down to having another play call, like having a true play caller for Mike Norvell in this offense?
I'll say no, because Mike Norvell has proven that he can do it before. You look at 22 and 2023. Obviously, this year has gone by the wayside, and there's nothing really that you can do to explain how terrible this offense is. But the proof is in the pudding. And he's done it at FSU before. He's done it at Memphis before. He's proven that he doesn't need a dedicated play caller. Now he's obviously going to have to tweak some things, make some adjustments, and reevaluate how things went this year. But there's certainly a path where he can turn it around on his own. Now, me personally, I would like to see him bring in an offensive coordinator with play calling duties, but I just don't know if Mike Norvell is going to be the guy to make that change. We've heard him speak publicly. He said he's going to evaluate it, and if he feels like the change is in the best interest of Florida State football, then that's something the program will look into. But we've seen this story before, with Jimbo Fisher and coaches. They don't like change, and they believe in their way. I just don't know if Mike is going to do it.
I'll say yes, because I've said it a few times the last few weeks, but how many times, even last year in an undefeated season, we're going, man, I didn't really like that play calling this week when they're throwing slot fades on 3rd and 3 and the unlimited amounts of wide receiver screens to the outside that we've seen that get -3 yards every single time, running on 2nd and 10. Mike needs to be the CEO kind of guy now going forward if he wants to have the hands-on approach everywhere. He can't do it all and still call plays. I don't think that's very realistic in this day and age of college football. And his offenses have just gotten predictable. Even if he evaluates himself and says, okay, I need to change the entire way I'm calling plays, that's still him coming up with an entirely new system. I don't know if I trust him to do that at this point, given the offense I've seen. And he doesn't have a Jordan Travis he's developing right now that can bail him out of some of these bad play calls. So I will say, yes, he does need a play caller.
I think it's going to come down to Michael Alford, too, at the end of the day. It kind of might be a situation to where, hey, we're going to go ahead and bring in somebody that is going to be the play caller, your offensive coordinator, and then you work from that with what you got type of deal. Because like you just said there, VZ, things like where you don't see Lawrence Toafili after the first quarter, even though he was bringing the most success to offensively, is like, okay, god dang, what is happening? Why in that world can that be an option to where you lose one of your best players on offense? It almost feels like he's benched for some reason. And that is something that consecutively happens with Mike Norvell. And like you said, we got the screens, we got putting players out there that continue to make mistakes week in and week out. We saw it earlier in the season when we saw Kyle Morlock have a 6th drop. You continue to start him there. You had DJU there at quarterback. And yes, okay, he's not the biggest problem in your offense. We know that, but there was no kind of success there at that time in the early parts of the season where you're like, okay, there's nothing gaining from seeing DJU there at quarterback, but you continued to put him out there on the field. Those kind of things to where I agree. I think you need to have somewhere where there is a true play caller coming into Tallahassee to do it. But like, I understand Dustin's point though, to where Mike wants to probably still hold on to those play calling duties. Most of these offensive head coaches, that's their job. That's the role that they want to hold on to. But maybe he's more fit for a CEO role. But I think it's going to come down to Michael Alford and Florida State's athletic director and that whole administration on having a conversation on what needs to be done in order to save your job. If you want to save your job moving forward, you've got to have most likely someone come in dedicated to play calling for you on this team. And that's what is really limited to him. You look at Kenny Dillingham and the success that he's been able to have at Arizona State and what he was able to do too, and Tallahassee as well, kind of being someone that he was working with and game preps and all throughout the week and on Saturdays whenever kind of dueling those play calling duties here and there. But that's something that, I'm interested to see, conversations about moving forward. Not only do you need a new play caller, but you got a whole kind of new staff that you're going to be implementing into an offense going into 2025, because if you do move on from Ron Dugan to that wide receiver room, you move on from Chris Thompson as your tight ends coach, you move on from Alex Atkins as your offensive line coach, things get very interesting on who you're going to be bringing in as a play caller and offensive coordinator. And those conversations have to be happening now. And I'm sure they've been happening in the last few weeks, but it's the biggest one to me right now is what Florida State's going to do with Alex Atkins and the play calling duties with Mike Norvell moving forward into 2025, if they're going to find any kind of success.
Okay, but so let's say they do make this change, they bring in the offensive coordinator, he's got the play calling duties, he's handling the majority of the offense. At that point, what's Mike Norvell's greatest strength to Florida State? Because I would argue the biggest thing that he brings right now on paper is his innovativeness offensively, what he does on that side of the ball.
We're seeing some innovation right now, let me tell you.
It's tough this year, but I mean, I don't think that Mike Norvell is a guy that you can necessarily point to as an elite recruiter. I mean, Florida State, they have been bringing in consistent top 10 classes. You look at what they've done this year. Again, I know Florida State's 1-9, historic losing season, but ranked number 48 in the country. A lot of rumors going around that 4-star quarterback Tramel Jones Jr. is going to end up flipping to Florida. We've talked about it before, but it seems like 4-star tight end Chase Lofton is going to flip to Nebraska. That would probably put Florida State into the 60s with 9 commits, and you're 3.5 weeks away from the early signing period. So recruiting is going by the wayside as well. And you think back into the last couple of years, you've lost a lot of your top recruits. I mean, right there at the door of the early signing period. We talked about Travis Hunter. That's one that everyone remembers, but KJ Bolden, there have been some quarterbacks you've lost, some other big defensive guys. Florida State just seems like they can't close at the final hour. And I mean, that to me, it's an indictment on the assistant coaching staff, but also on the head coach as well, not to be able to finish these recruiting battles and get these elite talents to Florida State. I mean, you look at some of the guys that they missed out on, they're making plays all over the country right now. And we're talking about guys like Travis Hunter, in the defensive backfield, guys up front on the defensive line, players at positions of need where Florida State could have certainly used those talents.
You'd even mention a guy like Corey Parrish at Minnesota, who is he leading the nation in interceptions, or is he just the highest graded freshman? Either way, and they wanted him to play linebacker, and he's eating it up at safety. So part of it's just they're misevaluating some of these guys too, and that's been the biggest issue as much as anything.